He wasn't supposed to look at me. People like Cassian Beaumont don't look at people like me. We're just background noise, the static between the stations of their chaotic lives. But that night, the air was so dry, it felt like the city was holding its breath, waiting for a match. I saw the gun before anyone else did. I saw the betrayal in the reflection of a champagne flute. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just lifted 2 fingers to my throat and made the cut. A silent signal. A death warrant? Or a proposal? I didn't know that by saving the devil, I was inviting him to drag me down into hell with him. And the worst part? I think I wanted to fall. The heat wave had turned the city into a kiln. Even inside the Obsidian Hall, where the air conditioning hummed with the desperate exertion of a dying engine, the atmosphere was stifling. It wasn't just the temperature, it was the money. Old money, blood money, new crypto money. It all smelled the same, metallic and desperate. Selina Crane adjusted her glasses, the thick frame sliding down a nose slick with nervous perspiration. She was invisible. It was her superpower. As a junior archivist for the Voronov auction house, her job was to stand in the shadows behind the velvet ropes, holding the manifest, and ensure that the multi-million-dollar artifacts didn't walk away in the pockets of a drunk billionaire. She wore a dress 2 sizes too big, a drab gray that merged perfectly with the slate walls. She kept her head down, her shoulders hunched. To the world, she was furniture. But Selina saw everything. She saw the senator's wife discreetly slip a Xanax into her gin. She saw the tremor in the auctioneer's left hand, a telltale sign that he was in debt to someone dangerous. And she saw him. Cassian Beaumont entered the room not like a man, but like a change in atmospheric pressure. The chatter, usually a deafening roar of gossip, died down to a murmur. He was tall, wearing a tuxedo cut so sharp it looked like it could draw blood. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was devastatingly handsome, but ruined by eyes that were devoid of warmth. They were the color of burnt ice. He didn't walk. He prowled. Selina felt a shiver rattle her spine. The Beaumont crime family owned the docks, the politicians, and half the police force. Cassian was the new head. The Prince of Silence, they called him, because his enemies didn't scream. They just vanished. He took a seat in the front row. His bodyguards, men built like vending machines, fanned out. Selina clutched her clipboard tighter. The main event was starting, the Fabergé egg of St. Petersburg. The auctioneer stepped up, his voice booming, but Selina's eyes drifted. She looked at the waiters circulating the room. There was a rhythm to service. Pour, smile, retreat. Pour, smile, retreat. One waiter was offbeat. He was moving toward Cassian's table. He held a silver tray with a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. But his wrist... Selina squinted. The cuff of his shirt rode up slightly. There was a tattoo. A black scorpion. Selina's breath hitched. In her research for the archives, she had cataloged symbols of the underworld to authenticate provenance on stolen goods. The scorpion was the sigil of the Volkov Syndicate, Cassian's sworn enemies. The truce between them had been signed in blood only a week ago. The waiter wasn't pouring wine. He was positioning the bottle. The reflection on the glass bottle distorted, but Selina saw the glint of a needle mechanism taped to the underside of the tray. A pressure trigger. If he set that tray down on Cassian's table, the localized blast would decapitate everyone within 3 feet. Time seemed to liquefy. To scream was to die. The bodyguards would shoot a screaming girl before she finished a sentence. To run was to let a massacre happen. Selina was paralyzed by her own shyness, her lifelong conditioning to never make a scene. But then, Cassian turned his head. He was scanning the room, bored, looking for threats, but looking too high. He looked past the waiter. He looked right at the shadow where Selina stood. Their eyes locked. It was an electrical shock, violent and immediate. He saw her. He actually saw her. Selina didn't think. Her instinct to preserve order, to protect the history in the room, overrode her fear. She held his gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She raised her hand slowly, bringing it to her neck. She tapped her jugular vein twice with her index finger. Hard. Then she flattened her hand and made a sharp, slashing motion toward the waiter, followed by a flat palm facing down. The kill spot! The enemy! Down! It was a silent charade, a desperate pantomime. Cassian didn't blink. Most men would have frowned. Confused. Cassian Beaumont didn't get confused. He processed the data. The shy girl in the shadows. The terror in her eyes. The specific gesture. The waiter approaching his blind spot. The waiter began to lower the tray. Your vintage, sir. Cassian didn't look at the waiter. He kept his eyes on Selina. In one fluid motion, unhurried and terrifyingly graceful, Cassian kicked the underside of the table. The heavy oak table flipped upward, crashing into the waiter just as the tray touched the surface. Boom! The explosion was muffled by the heavy wood, but the force blew the waiter backward in a spray of splintered oak and red wine. The concussion wave shattered the windows. Chaos erupted. Screams tore through the hall. Smoke filled the air, acrid and blinding. Selina was thrown back against the wall, her glasses flying off. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine. She slid down to the floor, curling into a ball, trying to disappear, trying to become the dust on the floorboards. I'm dead, she thought. I just involved myself in a gang war. Through the haze, she saw shadows moving. Gunfire erupted. Short, controlled bursts. Cassian's men were neutralizing the remaining threats. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the police, waiting for safety. Instead, she felt a hand grip her upper arm. It wasn't a gentle grip. It was steel. She looked up, squinting through the smoke. Cassian loomed over her. There was a cut on his cheekbone, bleeding sluggishly. His tuxedo was dusted with debris, but he looked calm. Terrifyingly calm. You, he said. His voice was deep, a rumble that she felt in her chest more than she heard. Selina squeaked, her throat dry. You saw it. It wasn't a question. Yes. He didn't thank her. He didn't offer her a hand up. He simply yanked her to her feet with one arm, pulling her body flush against his hard chest as a bullet pinged off the wall where her head had just been. You're coming with me, he growled. I can't, my job. You just resigned, Miss Crane, he said, reading her ID badge before ripping it off her dress and tossing it into the burning debris. Because if Volkov knows you saw that, you're a loose end. And if you're lying to me. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, sending a jolt of heat through her that had nothing to do with the fire. Then I'll kill you myself. The ride was a blur of neon lights and high-velocity turns. Selina sat in the back of the armored SUV, sandwiched between Cassian and a gargantuan man named Luca. The leather seats smelled of expensive cologne and gun oil. The city outside was a streak of amber and red, but inside, the silence was suffocating. Selina was hyperventilating. Short, shallow gasps. She clutched her knees, rocking slightly. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Why had she signaled? Why hadn't she just dove under a table? Cassian was on his phone, barking orders in a mix of French and English. Lock down the perimeter, find out who leaked the security detail, and get the doctor to the penthouse. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the seat. Then, he turned his entire body toward her. The interior light highlighted the sharp planes of his face. He looked like a fallen angel contemplating whether to save a soul or eat it. Breathe, he commanded. I can't, Selina gasped. Breathe, or you pass out. You pass out, I can't interrogate you. I can't interrogate you. I assume you're an enemy combatant. I'm an archivist, she wheezed. You're a civilian who spotted a Volkov assassin in a room full of trained security personnel before my head of security did, Cassian countered, his eyes narrowing. Civilians don't signal kill zone with military precision. Who trained you? Nobody, Selina cried, finding a surprising amount of volume. I watch documentaries, and I memorize patterns. Patterns? The waiter. He broke the service flow. He stepped with his left foot first. Service staff are trained to lead right to avoid colliding with guests. And the tattoo. The scorpion. Cassian stared at her. The silence stretched for a mile. He reached into the pocket of his jacket. Selina flinched, expecting a weapon. He pulled out a silver flask. He unscrewed the cap and held it out. Drink. I don't drink. It's water, you idiot. You're in shock. Selina took the flask with trembling hands. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was hot, calloused. She took a sip. It was ice-cold water. The shock of the cold helped ground her. She handed it back, not daring to meet his eyes. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave. Selina Crane." "Selina?" He tested the name, rolling it around his mouth like a piece of candy he hadn't decided if he liked yet. "You realize, Selina, that you just saved the life of a man the police classify as a domestic threat." I didn't want you to die." "Why?" She looked up then. Without her glasses, his face was slightly soft around the edges, but his eyes were piercingly clear. "Because nobody deserves to blow up while drinking Pinot Noir. It's a waste of good wine." A beat of silence. Then the corner of Cassian's mouth twitched. A micro-expression? Amusement. "It was a 96 Romani Conti," he muttered. "A tragedy indeed." The car swerved, pulling into the underground garage of a glass needle that pierced the city skyline, the spire, Cassian's fortress. "Out," he ordered. They moved through the building like a storm front. Private elevator, retinal scans, voice authorization. Selina tried to memorize the path, but her brain was foggy. They entered the penthouse. It was vast, minimal, and cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the burning city grid. There was no clutter, no personal photos. Just sleek black furniture and modern art that looked like violent slashes of paint on canvas. "Sit!" Cassian pointed to a lone chair in the center of the living room. Selina sat. She felt small, exposed. Cassian took off his jacket, tossing it onto a sofa. Underneath, he wore a gun holster over his white shirt. The contrast of the formal wear and the lethal weapon was jarring. He began to pace around her, a predator circling prey. "So," he began. "Selina Crane, archivist, no criminal record. I checked while we were driving. You live in a studio apartment in the East End. You have a cat named Barnaby. You pay your taxes early." Selina blinked. "How did you—" "I have resources. You're clean. Suspiciously clean." He stopped in front of her, leaning down, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. "Which means you're either the most innocent person I've ever met or the best sleeper agent in history." "I'm just shy," she whispered, the scent of sandalwood and gunpowder wafting off him, intoxicating and terrifying. "Shy people don't stare down the devil," he murmured, his face inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his icy irises. "You have eyes that see too much, Selina. That's a dangerous trait." "Is that why you kidnapped me?" "I didn't kidnap you, I extracted you." "Can I go home?" "No." "Why?" "Because the Volkovs saw you signal me. They know you ruined their hit. By morning, your apartment will be ash. If you go back there, you're dead." Selina felt the blood drain from her face. "So I'm a prisoner?" Cassian straightened up, his expression unreadable. "You're a guest, under extreme protection, indefinitely." He walked to a sleek sidebar and poured a drink. Amber liquid this time. He took a long swallow, watching her over the rim of the glass. "Welcome to your new life, Selina. Try not to break anything, including yourself." The first night was a sleepless purgatory. Selina was given a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the thread count higher than her monthly salary, but the door locked from the outside. She spent the hours pacing, her mind racing. She thought of Barnaby, her cat. Who would feed him? She thought of her job. She was probably fired for abandoning her post. When dawn broke, bleeding gray light through the heavy curtains, the lock clicked. Selina froze, standing by the window. Cassian entered. He had showered and changed. He wore black slacks and a charcoal cashmere sweater that softened the hard lines of his shoulders, though nothing could soften the intensity of his presence. He held a tray. "Breakfast," he announced, setting it on a small table. "Coffee, fruit, toast. Simple." "I'm not hungry," Selina said, her stomach traitorously growling. "Lying is a bad habit," he noted. "Eat, I need you lucid." "For what?" "For work." Selina blinked. "Work?" Cassian pulled a tablet from under his arm and sat on the edge of the bed. "I reviewed the security footage of the auction, frame by frame. You were right about the waiter's step pattern, but you missed something else." He tapped the screen and held it up. It was a grainy still of the crowd, moments before the explosion. "Look at the woman in the red dress," Cassian said, 3 rows back. Selina squinted. Without her glasses, it was hard. "I need my glasses. You left them in the hall." Cassian sighed, reached into his pocket and pulled out her thick black frame glasses. One lens was cracked. He handed them to her. She put them on. The world snapped into focus. She looked at the image. The woman in red. She was looking at her watch. "She's checking the time," Selina said. Look closer at the watch. Selina leaned in. She closed her eyes for a second, accessing that strange part of her brain that stored images like a hard drive. She remembered the woman. She remembered the glint on her wrist. It's not a watch, Selina said softly. It's a detonator readout. A dead man's trigger backup. If the waiter failed, she was the secondary. Cassian nodded slowly. Precisely. We caught the waiter. The woman in red got away. She's my leak. He stood up, towering over her. My security team is comprised of ex-special forces, Mossad and mercenaries. They missed her. You didn't. I just noticed details. It's how I catalog history. If you miss a chip in a vase, you devalue the legacy. I have a legacy, Selina. And right now, it's under attack. He crossed his arms. I'm offering you a job. I already have a job. No, you don't. The Voronov auction house burned down 2 hours ago. Arson. Selina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The archives! Gone. Along with your old life. Cassian's voice was devoid of pity, but not cruel. It was just factual. You have nowhere to go. The Volkovs want you dead. The police will ask too many questions I don't want answered. So, you work for me. Doing what? Being my eyes. I have enemies hiding in plain sight. I have business deals where a single twitch of an eyebrow means a lie. I need someone who can read the static. Someone who is invisible. You want me to be a gangster? I want you to be a consultant. He stepped closer, entering her personal space. He smelled of rain. No, not rain. He smelled of ozone and crushed herbs. You stay here. You live in luxury. I get your cat. My men are retrieving the beast as we speak. In exchange, you review surveillance. You sit in on meetings. You tell me what I'm missing. And if I refuse, Cassian leaned down, his face inches from hers. The tension in the room spiked. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something heavier, thicker. You won't refuse, he said softly. Because out there, you're a shy girl who gets walked on by the world. In here, you have power. You saved a king, Selina. That makes you royalty. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. My tailor will be here at noon. Burn those gray rags. If you're going to be in my world, you need to dress like you can survive it. The door clicked shut. But this time, Selina didn't hear the lock turn. She walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling, heat-hazed city. She touched her throat where she had made the signal. She wasn't an archivist anymore. She was something else, something undefined. And for the first time in her life, the silence around her didn't feel empty. It felt like it was waiting for her to speak. The transformation was not a Cinderella moment. There were no fairy godmothers. Only a severe Italian tailor named Marco with a mouthful of pins and eyes that judged Selina's posture with clinical disdain. Stand straight, Kara, Marco mumbled, adjusting the hem of a gown that cost more than Selina's student loans. You slouch like you are apologizing for existing. I usually am, Selina muttered, staring at herself in the three-way mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. The drab gray cardigan was gone. In its place was a sheath of midnight blue silk that clung to her curves like a second skin, high neck but backless, exposing the vulnerable ridge of her spine. Her hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun, was loose, cascading in soft waves. She looked dangerous. She looked like she belonged in the spire. Cassian entered without knocking. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes sweeping over her. He didn't smile. He didn't compliment her. He simply nodded. A transaction approved. Acceptable, he said. The meeting is in 20 minutes. Study the file I sent to your tablet. He turned to leave but stopped. And Selina, don't hide in the corner tonight. You sit at my right hand. The meeting took place in the glass box, a soundproof conference room suspended over the city lights on the 50th floor. The air conditioning was set to a frigid temperature, keeping everyone alert. Opposite Cassian sat Silas Thorne, a shipping magnate with a reputation for smuggling everything from diamonds to endangered species. Thorne was loud, boisterous, and sweating profusely despite the cold. Selina sat silently, her hands folded in her lap. She felt ridiculous, an imposter in high heels. But as the negotiations for shipping routes began, her anxiety started to recede, replaced by that familiar, hyper-focused hum in her brain. She watched Thorne. She watched his hands. I can guarantee safe passage through the straits, Thorne boomed, leaning back. My captains are loyal. Cassian swirled his scotch, looking bored. Your price is steep, Silas. 20% above market. The risk is high, Mr. Beaumont. The Volkovs are sniffing around. Selina narrowed her eyes. Thorne was tapping his ring against the glass table. Tap, tap, pause, tap. He did it again when he mentioned the arrival times. Tap, tap, pause, tap. But when he spoke about the cargo insurance, he didn't tap. When he spoke about his family, he didn't tap. The rhythm was specific. It wasn't a nervous tick. It was a distraction technique. Or a code? No. It was a tell. He was unconsciously keeping time with a lie. Selina reached under the table. Cassian's hand was resting on his thigh. She hesitated, her heart thumping against her ribs. This was insane, touching the boss. She placed her hand on his muscle tense beneath the expensive fabric of his trousers. He didn't look at her, but his fingers splayed, allowing her access. She tapped his hand twice. Tap, tap. Then she drew a line across his knuckles. Cut. He is lying. Cut the deal. Cassian didn't flinch. He didn't even pause his sentence. He simply set his glass down with a definitive clink. No, Cassian said. The single word sucked the oxygen out of the room. Thorne blinked. Excuse me. I said no. We won't be using your ship, Silas, and I won't be paying your premium. You need me, Beaumont. Thorne stood up, his face flushing red. You can't move that product without my fleet. I don't need a fleet that's already been compromised, Cassian said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. You sold the routes to the Volkovs yesterday, didn't you? Thorne froze. The sweat on his forehead seemed to congeal. That's absurd. Is it? Cassian stood up, buttoning his jacket. You're vibrating with guilt, Silas. You're a terrible liar. Cassian turned to his head of security, Luca. Escort Mr. Thorne out. If he returns to the city, remove his kneecaps. As Thorne was dragged out, sputtering protests, the room fell silent. Cassian turned to Selina. The other men in the room looked at her with new wariness. She wasn't just the girl in the dress anymore. How did you know? Cassian asked, his voice low, intimate. He was tapping, Selina whispered, adrenaline making her hands shake. Morse code rhythm, HELP, subconscious. He was terrified. A man ripping you off for greed is confident. A man ripping you off because he's being coerced is terrified. The Volkovs must have his family. Cassian stared at her, a strange light in his eyes. It wasn't just approval. It was hunger. Not for her body, but for her mind. Morse code, he mused. I underestimated you, little mouse. He reached out, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. The touch seared. You did well, he murmured. But now they know you're useful. That makes you a target. 2 weeks passed. The Spire became Selina's entire world. She learned the rhythms of the criminal underworld as quickly as she had learned the Dewey Decimal System. She learned that silence was currency and information was ammunition. But the isolation was beginning to fray her nerves. One evening, while Cassian was out on business, a euphemism for violence, Selina was in the library. It was a massive room filled with rare first editions that Cassian likely never read. Barnaby, her ginger tabby cat, was curled up on a leather armchair. The only comforting relic from her old life. A chime sounded from the private elevator. Selina froze. The elevator was biometric. Only Cassian and Luca had access. The doors slid open. It wasn't Cassian. A woman stepped out. She was tall, blonde, and wore a white trench coat that looked pristine despite the dusty heat of the city night. She held a small, flat package. Selina stood up, her heart hammering. Who are you? The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were dead. Delivery for Mr. Beaumont. Priority. Leave it there, Selina commanded, trying to channel Cassian's authority. It requires a signature. Are you the new pet? The woman's gaze raked over Selina with amusement. I'm his associate. Associate. Cute. The woman walked forward, heels clicking on the marble. I'm Isabella. Tell him I stopped by. She dropped the package on the desk and turned. As she walked back to the elevator, she paused. Oh, and Selina, the blue dress suits you, but red is more your color. It hides the blood better. The elevator doors closed. Selina stared at the package. Her training screamed danger. Don't touch it. Call Luca. But curiosity, that fatal flaw of all archivists, pulled her forward. It wasn't ticking. It was flat. She used a letter opener to slice the tape. Inside was a photograph. It was an old black and white photo of a young boy and a girl standing in front of a burning house. The boy was unmistakably Cassian, his eyes already cold. The girl looked like the woman who had just left. Isabella. But it was the object wrapped in tissue paper beneath the photo that made Selina scream. It was a pair of glasses. Her old glasses. The ones she had left in her apartment the night of the explosion. The lenses were smashed, and the frames were scorched. "We were in your home. We can get in here." The door to the penthouse burst open. Cassian stormed in, gun drawn, Luca right behind him. They had been alerted by the unauthorized elevator breach. Cassian saw Selina standing by the desk, shaking. He saw the photo. He saw the glasses. He went pale. A ghost passed over his face, a look of pure, unadulterated horror that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a rage so intense the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. "Did she touch you?" he roared, grabbing Selina's shoulders, scanning her for injuries. No, she just left this." Cassian looked at the photo. "Isabella. She said red is my color." Cassian cursed, a string of Italian obscenities. He turned to Luca. "Sweep the building, every floor. If a fly buzzes without a permit, kill it." Luca ran out. Cassian turned back to Selina. He was breathing hard. "I thought she was dead, 5 years ago. I buried her." "Who is she?" Selina asked, her voice trembling. "My sister," Cassian rasped. "And the most dangerous assassin the Volkovs ever bought." He paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "She came here to taunt me, to show me she can get to you. She knows you're my weak point." "I'm your weak point?" Selina asked quietly. Cassian stopped. He looked at her, his expression unguarded for the first time. "You see things others don't. You possess the one thing I lost years ago, innocence. And now, because of me, you are being hunted by my own blood." He walked over to a wall panel and punched in a code. The wall slid open to reveal a rack of weapons. "I can't hide you anymore, Selina. The tower isn't safe. If they can get in here, they can get anywhere." He pulled out a small, sleek black pistol. He checked the chamber and turned to her. "Take it." I can't shoot a gun." "Learn," he ordered, shoving the cold metal into her hand. "Tonight, we go to the range downstairs. You have a brain that processes patterns. Combat is just patterns. Aim, breathe, squeeze. You master this or you die." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," Cassian said, his eyes burning into hers. "I will protect you with my life, Selina. But if I fall, you need to be the one standing over the bodies." The training was brutal. For 3 days, Selina didn't see the sun. She lived in the underground tactical range of the Spire. Her hands were blistered, her shoulders bruised from the recoil. Cassian was a relentless teacher. He didn't coddle her. He shouted. He corrected. He pushed her until she cried, and then he pushed her past the tears until she was just numb efficiency. "Don't look at the target's face," he instructed, standing behind her, his chest pressed against her back, guiding her arms. "Look at the center of mass, the heart, the lungs. It's just anatomy. You're an archivist. Archive them." She fired. "Bang, center mass." "Good," he whispered against her hair. On the 4th night, the summons came. "The Volkovs have called for a parley," Cassian announced, checking his cufflinks in the mirror. "Neutral ground, the Hollow." "The underground casino?" Selina asked. She had read the files. "Yes, it's a trap, obviously." "Then why go?" "Because Isabella will be there. And we need to end this family reunion before she burns down the city." He turned to her. "You're coming." "Me?" "You're my lucky charm. And my second set of eyes, you'll be wearing a wire. You stay at the bar. You watch the room. If you see the setup, you say the word." "What's the word?" "Obsidian." The Hollow was a cavernous basement beneath an abandoned meatpacking plant. It smelled of rust, expensive perfume, and fear. The elite of the criminal underworld were there, gathered around roulette wheels and poker tables. Cassian walked in, Selina on his arm. She wore a dress of deep crimson, Isabella's suggested color. It was a defiant statement. "I am not afraid to bleed." They separated. Cassian went to the high-stakes poker table where Dmitry Volkov, the patriarch, sat waiting. Selina drifted to the bar. She ordered a sparkling water and turned her back to the counter, scanning the room in the reflection of the mirror behind the bar. She saw the guards. She saw the exits. She saw Isabella. Cassian's sister was disguised as a dealer at a blackjack table in the corner. She wore a black wig, but Selina recognized the posture. The predator's stillness. Selina tapped her earpiece. Isabella is at table 4. Dealer. Cassian's voice came back in her ear, calm, steady. Copy. Keep watching. The poker game began. The tension was palpable. Volkov was smiling, a shark exposing his teeth. So, Cassian, Volkov sneered, I hear you have a new pet, the little librarian. She's not a pet, Dmitri. She's the one who's going to catalog your extinction. Volkov laughed. Bold words, but you seem to have forgotten the rules of the house. No weapons. I'm not armed, Cassian said, spreading his hands. But we are, Volkov snarled. Suddenly the lights cut out. Pitch blackness. Screams erupted. Selina was shoved against the bar. The sound of silencers, foot, filled the air. Selina, get down! Cassian's voice screamed in her ear before the connection went dead with a burst of static. Panic seized her. She couldn't see anything. She dropped to the floor, crawling through the sea of legs and overturned stools. She needed to find cover. Someone grabbed her hair. Found you, a female voice hissed. Isabella. Selina didn't think. She reacted. The pattern. Step, twist, drive. She drove her elbow back into the attacker's stomach. Isabella grunted, her grip loosening. Selina spun around, grabbing a heavy crystal decanter from a fallen tray. She swung it with all her might. Smash! Glass shattered. Isabella cried out, stumbling back. Emergency lights flickered on, dim, red, bathing the room in a hellish glow. Isabella was on the floor, blood trickling from her forehead. But she was laughing. She raised a gun, aiming it directly at Selina's chest. Goodbye, little mouse. Bang. Selina flinched, but she felt no pain. Isabella jerked, a look of surprise on her face. She slumped forward. Behind her stood Cassian. He held a gun, one he must have disarmed from a guard. He was breathing heavily, his tuxedo torn, blood on his shirt. He looked at his sister's body, then at Selina. I told you, he said, his voice cracking. I'd kill her myself. He rushed to Selina, pulling her into his arms. The embrace was desperate, bone-crushing. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, assuring himself she was alive. Are you hurt? He demanded, pulling back to look at her. No. Selina looked at the chaos around them. The Volkovs were retreating. The ambush had failed. We have to go, now, Cassian said. He dragged her toward the exit, but as they reached the heavy iron doors, Selina stopped. Wait, she said, looking back at the poker table. What? Selina, move! The chips, she said, pointing. Volkov left his chips, but he took the cards. So, why would he take the cards? Unless... Selina's mind raced. Unless the cards have the codes, the shipping codes, the accounts, everything. Cassian looked at her, then back at the table. He grinned, a savage, blood-stained grin. You really are a dangerous woman, Selina Crane. He grabbed a lighter from his pocket and tossed it onto the felt table, right onto the pile of remaining cash and alcohol. Fire whooshed up, creating a wall of heat between them and the room. Let it burn, he said. We're done here. They ran into the night, the sirens wailing in the distance. They had survived the lion's den. But Selina knew, as she gripped Cassian's hand, that the real danger wasn't the bullets. It was the fact that for the first time in her life, she didn't want to go back to being invisible. She liked the fire. And she loved the man who started it. The safe house was not a house. It was a decommissioned Cold War bunker buried beneath a vineyard on the outskirts of the city. The walls were thick concrete, the air filtered and stale, smelling of old dust and new anxiety. Cassian sat on a metal crate, his shirt off, while Selina stitched the gash on his shoulder. The bullet from the casino had grazed him. A lucky miss, or perhaps a warning shot. You have steady hands for a librarian, Cassian gritted out, wincing as the needle pierced his skin. Archivist, Selina corrected automatically, tying off the suture with a precise knot. And you have too much scar tissue. It's hard to find fresh skin to stitch. She stepped back, wiping her bloodied hands on a rag. The adrenaline of the casino shootout had faded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. She looked at Cassian. He was battered, bruised, and exhausted. Yet the lethal energy coil inside him was wound tighter than ever. Isabella is dead, Selina said softly. The reality of it hung heavy in the room. She was dead a long time ago, Cassian replied, pulling on a fresh black t-shirt. What died tonight was just the shell the Volkovs used to torment me. He stood up, towering over her in the cramped space. But Dmitri Volkov won't stop. He's lost his ace. Now he'll bring the hammer. He will scorch the earth to get us. To get me, Selina said. Cassian looked at her sharply. Us! No, Cassian. Think about it. Selina walked to the bank of monitors set up on a makeshift desk. She pulled up the digitized scans of the playing cards Dimitri had held, the ones she had memorized before the fire. Why did he have the codes on physical cards? Why not a digital drive? Why not the cloud? Because he's old school, paranoid. No, because the system requires a biological key. Selina's fingers flew across the keyboard. I've been running the sequences in my head, the numbers on the cards. They aren't bank accounts. They are coordinates, and a genetic sequence. She turned to face him, her eyes wide behind the cracked lens of her glasses. They lead to the Oculus, the mythical server that controls the entire city's dark web infrastructure. The blackmail, the shipping routes, the police payrolls. Whoever controls the Oculus is God in this city. Cassian frowned. The Oculus is a fairy tale, a ghost story criminals tell rookies. It's real, Selina insisted. And the access key isn't a password, it's a person. She took a deep breath. My father. The silence in the bunker was deafening. Cassian froze. Your father was a clockmaker. You told me he died when you were 10. He was a watchmaker, Selina corrected. But he didn't just make watches. He built mechanisms. Complex, unbreakable locks. He worked for everyone. The Beaumonts, the Volkovs, the syndicates. He was the neutral party. The architect. Selina's voice trembled slightly. I remember when I was little, he used to make me memorize sequences. He called them rhymes. I thought they were games. Tap, tap, slide. North, star, blue, void. She looked at her hands. I didn't recognize the waiter's tattoo because I read a book, Cassian. I recognized it because my father drew it in his notebook the day he disappeared. The Volkovs didn't just kill him. They tried to extract the location of the Oculus from him. They failed. Cassian stepped closer, his face unreadable. So the key is me, Selina whispered. The sequences are locked in my memory. The Volkovs figured it out. That's why they didn't shoot me immediately at the auction. That's why Isabella played with me. They need me alive to unlock the city. Once I do, I'm disposable. Cassian swore softly. He reached out, cupping her face in his large, rough hands. You are not a key. You are not a weapon. You are Selina. I am the target, Cassian. As long as I'm with you, you're in danger. The entire underworld is coming for this bunker. Let them come. Cassian growled, his thumb tracing her lower lip. I'd burn the world twice over before I let them touch you. He kissed her then. A desperate, searing claim. It wasn't gentle. It was a war declaration. He kissed her like he could breathe the memories out of her, like he could rewrite her history with his own. Selina melted into him, her shyness evaporating in the heat of his touch. She wasn't the girl in the gray cardigan anymore. She was the woman holding the detonator. And he was the fire. Morning brought no sunlight into the bunker, only the harsh buzz of the proximity alarm. They're here, Luca's voice crackled over the radio. 3 SUVs, heavy tactical gear. They found the ventilation shafts. Cassian was instantly awake, gun in hand. He looked at Selina, who was curled on the cot. Stay here. Lock the blast door. Do not open it unless you hear my voice code. No, Selina said, swinging her legs off the bed. She stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in her ruined red dress. I'm done hiding. This isn't a debate, Selina. This is a kill team. Exactly. And if you go out there and shoot them, 10 more will take their place. Dimitri has an army. You have a squad. She walked over to the computer terminal. I can end this, but I need a connection. What are you doing? I'm logging in to the Oculus. You said you didn't know where it was. I don't need to know where it is. I am the key, remember? She closed her eyes, visualizing the rhymes her father had taught her. The patterns, the taps, north, star, blue, void. Her fingers danced over the keys. It wasn't standard coding. It was an intuitive interface her father had designed specifically for her mind. On the screen, a dormant program woke up. A stylized eye opened, blinking green. Access granted. Hello, little bird. Tears pricked Selina's eyes at her father's nickname for her. I'm in. Outside, the first explosion rocked the bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling. They're breaching the outer door, Luca shouted over the comms. Gunfire erupted, the chatter of automatic weapons echoing through the concrete. Cassian grabbed a bag of grenades. I'm buying you time. Whatever you're doing, do it fast. He ran out. The blast door hissed shut, sealing Selina in with the glowing screens. She worked feverishly. She could see the Volkovs' financial structure laid out like a digital nervous system. Their accounts, their safe houses, their bribes. She could delete it. She could wipe them out. But then she saw something else, a file labeled Beaumont. She hesitated. Her finger hovered over the enter key. She opened it. It wasn't a hit list. It was a contract, dated 20 years ago, signed by Cassian's father and hers. Agreement. The architect will build the Oculus to protect the families. In exchange, the Beaumonts will ensure the safety of the architect's daughter, Selina, should the Volkovs break the truce. Selina stared at the screen. Cassian hadn't just found her by accident at the auction. The Beaumonts had been watching her for years, keeping her in the shadows, ensuring she got that job at the archive where she would be safe, invisible. Cassian knew, maybe not about the specifics of the key, but he knew she was important. Was it all a lie? The romance? The rescue? Boom! The inner door buckled, sparks showered down. Selina looked at the security feed. Cassian was pinned down in the corridor, bleeding from a fresh wound in his leg. He was out of ammo. 3 Volkov enforcers were advancing, shields up. He was going to die for her. If he was just using her, he would have traded her by now. He would have given her to Volkov to save his empire. But he was fighting. He was dying. Selina made her choice. She didn't wipe the Volkov accounts. That was too simple. She typed in a new command. She rerouted the Oculus. She targeted the global Interpol database and the FBI Cybercrimes Division. She sent a silent signal to the entire world. She uploaded the Volkovs' entire criminal history. Every murder, every transaction, every GPS location of their current operatives, directly to every law enforcement agency on the planet. Then she unlocked the blast door. Cassian clicked his empty gun. Click, click. He tossed it aside and pulled a combat knife. "Come on, then!" he roared at the advancing shadows. The Volkov soldiers raised their rifles. Suddenly, their earpieces screamed with feedback. "Abort! Abort! We are compromised!" a voice shrieked. "The feds are at the manor. They're at the docks. They know everything." The soldiers hesitated, looking at each other. Their phones started buzzing incessantly. Selina stepped out of the smoke-filled doorway of the inner bunker. She held a tablet in her hand, the screen glowing with a map of the city. Every Volkov asset was blinking red. "Go home," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it possessed an terrifying authority. "Your accounts are frozen. Your identities are burned. The police are 3 minutes away from this location. If you stay, you go to prison for life. If you run, you might make it to the border." The lead soldier looked at her, then at his phone. He saw the news alert. "Massive leak exposes Volkov syndicate." He cursed, lowered his weapon, and signaled his team. "Move out! Every man for himself!" They turned and fled, the sound of their retreating boots heavy on the concrete. Cassian slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He was covered in dust and blood, breathing hard. Selina walked over to him. She dropped the tablet and knelt in the debris. "You did it," Cassian rasped, looking at her with awe. "You burned them." "I burned the forest to save the tree," she said softly. Cassian reached for her hand. "You saw the file, the contract." "I did. I didn't know who you were until the auction," he swore, his eyes desperate. "My father, he kept secrets. When I saw you signal, I just saw a girl who was brave. The rest, I found out later." "I know," Selina said. She brushed the hair from his sweaty forehead. "You fought for me, Cassian. That's the only data point that matters." "So," he groaned, trying to sit up, "we are now the only crime family left in the city?" "No," Selina smiled. A small, mysterious smile that didn't reach her eyes. It lived there. "I deleted the Beaumont files from the Oculus before I destroyed it. You're not a crime boss anymore, Cassian." He blinked. "What am I?" "You're a legitimate businessman with a very messy past that no one can prove." She stood up and offered him a hand. "And I'm your consultant." Cassian looked at her hand. The hand that had cut the air and saved his life. The hand that had just dismantled an empire with a few keystrokes. He took it. He pulled himself up, wincing but standing tall. "Consultant," he mused. "I think I can offer better terms than that." "Oh? Like what?" "Partner," he said, pulling her close. "In everything." Outside, the sirens were getting louder. The police were coming to sweep the empty shell of the bunker. But the ghosts were gone. Cassian and Selina walked toward the emergency exit tunnel, leaving the darkness behind. They say silence is empty, but they are wrong. Silence is full of answers if you know how to listen. Selina Crane was no longer the shy girl who faded into the wallpaper. She was the woman who walked beside the wolf of the city, his equal, his conscience, and his keeper. The Voronov auction house was rebuilt, but Selina never went back to the archives. She didn't need to preserve history anymore. She was too busy making it. On quiet nights, when the city slept, she would sometimes tap a rhythm on Cassian's chest. North, star, blue, void. A reminder of the code that bound them. He would catch her hand, kiss her fingertips, and whisper the only signal that mattered now. Stay. And she always did. If you enjoyed this story of silent signals and loud explosions, please hit that like button. It helps the algorithm find more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. What do you think? Did Selina make the right choice deleting the files? Let me know in the comments below.